"125 years ago, here in Prague, capital of the Czech Republic, a writer was born who's now read and taught all over the world. Franz Kafka, widely and rightly considered the most influential writer of the 20th century. His great works have legendary status. The Trial, a man arrested for nothing. The Castle, a man struggling with a vast bureaucracy. The Metamorphosis, a man changed into a beetle. They've given birth to their very own word, Kafkaesque. And Kafka's become an industry. His name and that iconic face shift tourist souvenirs here, and in the rest of the world, he's generated countless biographies, coffee table books, and academic studies. Like Shakespeare, Kafka's become a brand. I've been reading about him, writing about him, teaching him for 25 years, and I've come to believe that the myths of his life are utterly false. Franz Kafka, the Nostradamus of Prague, a poor, shy, isolated, hypersensitive Jew trapped among Germans and Czechs. A Middle European Nostradamus, scribbling deep, dark tales that he never wanted to be published, almost ignored in his own lifetime, but somehow able to peer into the coming darkness to uncannily predict the Holocaust itself. Well, that's the myth. It's time to excavate the real Franz Kafka. Someone must have been slandering Joseph K. because one morning, without his having done anything wrong, he was arrested. Who were these people? What were they talking about? What authority did they belong to? K lived in a free country, didn't he? The world was at peace. The laws all stood firm. Who dared attack him in his own home?
So right now we're standing at Franz Kafka statue. He wasn't really famous. He was writing his books, his articles, but he wasn't confident enough to publish them. His dream job was to be a writer.
Okay, let's deal with this most basic part of the myth first. Not published in his own lifetime and dirt poor. Well, okay, that's just something you find on the internet. But the strange thing is the standard university researcher's textbook from Germany is no better. There it is, on the back of the cover, in black and white. Almost unknown in his own lifetime.
The myth of the tragic writer looms large. His diaries are full of the tragic existence of the writer, how he's unsuccessful, the constant self-recriminations about the writing, the feeling that it's never going to be successful, calling it his scribblings. It's very easy to misunderstand that at the same time he was published as a writer, he had certain success.
People seem to want a Kafka who was almost unknown in his own lifetime. Sorry, not so. By 1915, Kafka already had 2 books out. And then, suddenly, in October of that year, out of the blue, his career received a major boost. The most famous playwright in Germany won Berlin's biggest literary prize, but then publicly handed the actual prize money over to Kafka. Now, that's quite an event in the life of a writer, you'd have thought. So why is it hardly mentioned in the biographies? Well, a bit of detective work about exactly how it happened might help explain. The secret lies in this upmarket literary magazine from 1908. See the names of the editors? Franz Bly, remember that one, was judge of the prize in 1915, and this man was the famous playwright he gave the prize to. And their magazine was the very first place Kafka was ever published. So, in 1915, 2 influential literary insiders cooked up a little scheme to help the young Franz Kafka, who they themselves had discovered 7 years before. Kafka's publishers are tipped off. They know this is his breakthrough moment. They rush out his latest story, The Metamorphosis, and they put out a press advert. advert used the prize news and 5 wonderful reviews of Kafka's earlier work.
Your whole life will be changed.
A gentle genius of a writer.
One can only make comparisons with classics of literature.
A unique glow as of high summer.
Leaves you feeling as though you've experienced a miracle.
Hot stuff. As well it might be, because 3 of the reviews are by good friends of Kafka's best friend. The other 2 are by Kafka's best friend himself and Kafka's second best friend. Almost unknown in his lifetime, hardly, Franz Kafka was backed by a very useful literary clique, and The Metamorphosis came out with quite a fanfare. When Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from unquiet dreams, he found himself lying in his own bed, transformed into a gigantic beetle. Why did I have to choose such a stressful job, he thought. Samsa was a travelling salesman. Day in, day out, on the road. But no one wants to think of this as a prize-winning book. Everyone much prefers the myth of the unknown artist, especially the tourist guides.
Have you ever not heard about Franz Kafka? Yes. So what do you know about him?
He wrote the Metamorphosis.
Yeah, he wrote Metamorphosis. He was very low confident about his work, about his writing.
Everybody wants to keep that myth of the unknown artist. But hold on. So Kafka once won some money and recognition. But surely he was poor and lonely the rest of the time, wasn't he? Now, this building here doesn't feature on any of the Prague tours, which is curious because it's one of the most important witnesses to the reality of Franz Kafka's life. The German speakers were a small ruling elite in Prague, and among them Hermann Kafka was a substantial citizen whose wealth enabled his son to go to one of the most upmarket schools and study whatever he wanted at university. And in 1918, Hermann was able to buy this house outright as an investment for the modern equivalent of £6 to £7 million. The Kafkas certainly weren't poor, but the myth is that Franz's life was ruined by his father's domestic tyranny.
Franz Kafka was never good enough for his father. His relationship with his father was very difficult. His father was the typical example of the strong man.
Like many self-made men, Hermann Kafka certainly had trouble relating to his posh, arty son.
One day, old Kafka opened one drawer, and there was a quittance for 10 crowns or 10 marks. He said, look, Franz made money with his writing. He was paid for it. 10 crowns or 10 marks. The old man couldn't believe it.
He admired father because he had a shop, he knows to make money, he can care for a family. In this period, it was the father, the main man in the family, and everybody must do what he wants.
The notorious bully portrayed in most biographies? No, Hermann was just a rather typical Edwardian father, and his social connections certainly helped land Kafka his job. It fits the myth of the struggling artist to think of Kafka as trapped in some dead-end bureaucratic wage slavery.
Entirely false.
This is where he worked, and he wasn't some kind of lowly insurance clerk. He was a senior executive, and by the time of his mid-30s, he was earning 5 or 6 times what an ordinary working man got for a 6-hour day. That's the real Franz Kafka, a well-paid senior civil servant. I couldn't resist the fact I've bumped into my long-lost brother Andreas from Germany here and his son Lee from America, who have read Kafka themselves, although many years ago. And I'd just like to ask you, Andreas, what do you know about Kafka?
He's from Czech Republic, caught in a system of a totalitarian system.
Rich or poor?
Well, poor. I learned he was poor. and that he couldn't live off his writing.
What impression did you have of Kafka's life? Was he rich, poor, lonely, sad, whatever, you know?
Yeah, I had an impression that he was a little maybe poorer and kind of lonely.
Well, Kafka lived till he was 31 in his parents' place. He moved out then finally to a sister's flat, then another sister's flat, and when he finally moved into his bachelor pad just across the river, it was not some kind of bedsit. It was to a high-ceilinged apartment in a palace, which now has rather different tenants. So, not poor, not lonely, not isolated, but surely Franz Kafka was shy and hypersensitive with girls, wasn't he?
Sometimes I'm getting questions about Franz Kafka. For example, if he was a happy guy and if he had a lot of girlfriends. Franz Kafka was not confident, even though he was good looking. He found himself very skinny, not attractive for women.
So, hypersensitive and shy with girls. Well, it all depends what kind of girls. Kafka's Prague was, like now, an all-night city famous for poor, available Slavic girls, and Kafka knew every brothel in the place at first hand. His sexual imagination was forged in this world, and in his 20s, he wasn't in the least tortured by it. He writes of walking past a brothel as if passing a lover's window. He merrily proposed to his best friend that they could save money if they went out at 5 a.m. when everyone else is broke and had their girls as an early breakfast. One of those girls was hurt, if not surprised, that one's not so nice to a whore as to a girl in an affair. Kafka knew what he was talking about because he also had a full-on affair with a good-time girl. He wrote happily to his best friend Max Brod about her boyish body and her many other lovers. She was a waitress called Hansi Sokol, who sometimes described herself as an artiste or modiste, in other words, the Edwardian equivalent of an actress, model, whatever. Kafka and Hansi were an item for at least some months, and he remembered her fondly several years later. But has anybody ever even tried to research her? Nope, she's not even mentioned in most biographies. Well, the idea of Franz Kafka hanging out with a girl like Hansi just doesn't fit the myth.
Kafka was very handsome, slim, tall, and olive complexion, which white Czech girls liked very much. So he was very lucky with girls.
If I would living in this time, I fall in love with Kafka, sure.
It seems to me the key thing here is marriage. That's the difference between women that matter and women that don't matter, in a sense, isn't it? And when he's with a woman with whom there is the potential for marriage, then it becomes an issue about being taken away from the writing. I think when the reality of that strikes him, then it becomes an impossible tension. And when he's with the women in the brothels, then he's freed from that.
Kafka's trouble wasn't sex. His trouble was respectable sex with decent girls like his fiancée Felice, who he seems not to have actually fancied at all. He certainly did fancy his Czech translator Milena. He cheated on his second fiancée with her, but Milena was posh and literary. Kafka tied himself in agonizing knots trying to explain to her that he was actually into nasty sex with easy girls, nasty being Kafka's own word. Milena was utterly confused, and she began the myth that Kafka was just too pure and sensitive for this world.
Franz Kafka statue.
That myth has been carefully maintained ever since, so carefully that it amounts to censorship. What we're about to see is the biggest secret in Kafka studies. It's been knowable for decades, but it's never been shown before anywhere. I've got some pictures here from a journal that we know Kafka owned, and I'd like you to have a look at them. These are...
Shall I take my glass?
Oh, I think... It's a magazine which Kafka bought. Have you seen those before?
No, I haven't seen it before, but I think so. It's. I am surprised.
In 1906, Franz Blei, future publisher and prize giver to Franz Kafka, bought out a subscribers-only magazine called The Amethyst. Kafka was one of the buyers, and this is why it was never sold openly.
It's very nice. Good one. From where do you have it?
It's a magazine called Der Amethyst.
I never saw it. Thank you.
Yeah, and do you know, no professor has published this. But it's in...
Can you make me a copy?
You have this, please. It's my present for you. The Amethyst was soon banned. Its name was changed to Opals to fool the police. Franz Kafka subscribed to both versions. We even know exactly where he kept them. Right here, in his parents' house, in a locked bookcase. And his gatekeepers have made sure they stay there safely locked away from you and me to this very day. So I'm going to the Franz Kafka Society's library to see if they've got a copy. This extraordinary shrine to Franz Kafka contains every book he's known to have owned. But not the Amethyst and Opals, of course. But there's something else you might notice here. Something else people aren't very keen to talk about. We're in Prague, capital of the Czech Republic, and Kafka's always called a Czech Jew today. But look, virtually all his books are in German. History often isn't very comfortable. The myth today is that Kafka, part German, part Jew, part Czech, was some kind of model of a modern multicultural author. The truth is that he wrote in German, he was published in German, he thought in German, he dreamed in German. What's so hard to recall now is that before World War I, German was the great language of modernity and progress. Especially to Central European Jews. Throughout Kafka's life, whenever Jewish people from all over the world gathered to discuss the longed-for creation of Israel, the language of the conferences was always German. Kafka was a loyal Jewish German Bohemian citizen of the Austrian Empire, and not just passively loyal either. Kafka expected and wanted Austria-Hungary and Germany to win the First World War. On November the 5th, 1915, after much thought, he invested about £25,000 at today's values in these. War bonds drawn on the Austrian Empire. Kafka's investment depended totally on the Austrian Empire winning the First World War. A lot of people find this document very hard to believe when I show it to them, because this is an investment Kafka made as a Jew backing the German and Austrian war effort in 1915. And was this extraordinary?
It was natural. It was not so out of the thinking. Why? Because you have to understand it in the historical set. This is First World War, and who is the enemy? It's Russia. And what is Russia? Russia is the country of the pogroms against the Jews.
Compared to Russia, the Austrian Empire was a safe haven for Jews, with law and order guaranteed by Kaiser Franz Joseph. But Austria and Germany lost. Within 3 years, Kafka's war bonds were utterly worthless. So much for Kafka foreseeing the future. No, Kafka saw only what people in his time and place saw. And this is amazingly clear if we look at a place where he spent a lot of time, but which is hardly mentioned today. it's time for us to discover Dr. Kafka's asylum for war-damaged mental patients in Frankenstein. And don't forget that the place we're travelling through now was, in Kafka's day, German. In 1916, Kafka fronted a public appeal to turn a sanatorium here into a hospital for mental victims of the Great War. We're the first film crew ever to come here. You'd have thought that Dr. Kafka's asylum at Frankenstein would be an irresistible attraction. But no one wants to know about this place now. No tour guides here. In 1916, Kafka personally drew up an appeal to kickstart this institution. His appeal had the headline, Folk Comrades. Now, the German word Kafka used, Volksgenossen, was to become one of the signature words of the Nazis. Kafka says that his proposed asylum will be reserved for the war damage of German Bohemia for now, but will later be a permanent resource for mentally ill German Bohemian folk comrades. You see, no mention at all of wounded Czech soldiers. Kafka is appealing to German speakers on behalf of German speakers, and he's using language that will come back to haunt Europe when this part of the world is reclaimed as German soil by Adolf Hitler. But Kafka has no idea of this. Of course he doesn't. How could he? He is a normal human being, for God's sake, not some prophet of the future. Even in his dreams, Kafka trusted in Germany. On the 10th of November 1917, he dreamed that he was an Austrian soldier. The battle was going very badly, but then the cavalry arrived, or rather, the Germans. Prussian guards, young, quiet men, not many, maybe only a company of them. The intervention of these men is my deliverance, and I awake. But even the Prussian Guard couldn't save the Austrian Empire. In 1918, Prague became capital of Czechoslovakia almost overnight, and Franz Kafka's homeland, German Jewish Prague, was gone forever. Franz Kafka is often claimed as one of the great cultural jewels of the Czech nation, but was he really a Czech writer in that sense?
You can trace the identity crisis, or whatever we call it, on the academic level, but who was he? He was a German-speaking Prague Jew. That is obvious.
In Prague, language was politics. The Czechs beat up Jews and burned Jewish shops because to them, the Jews were Germans.
I tell you, in the Central Europe, if you are a Jew, you speak German, and you live in a Czech land, so everybody complains. Czechs complain that you speak German, Germans complain that you are Jewish, so we are used to it here in Central Europe.
Prague is beautiful, but it has claws. It can hurt you.
Here's the new Century's Eve issue, 31st December 1899, of Kafka's daily paper. This is German Jewish history without hindsight. Shame on the Czechs for the medieval lunacy of anti-Semitism. Of course, we know that German culture was soon to go psychotic in the Holocaust, the darkest hour of history. From our side of the Holocaust, it's almost impossible to reimagine a world where Jew and German could be seen as virtually the same thing, where a German-speaking army could sometimes have to save synagogues and Jewish businesses from Czech rioters. But that's the way it was. We know that within 30 years, Kafka's entire family will be wiped out by the Nazis, but he didn't see it coming. Kafka's sights remained on Germany to the end. He moved to Berlin. His last book was published in Berlin. That world-famous photograph of him was taken in Berlin. It was only illness that drove him back to Prague, back to his parents. He died shortly before his 7th book came out, with a pretty and devoted young actress at his side. By then, he'd been publicly praised, and he knew it, by almost every major German writer of his day.
So why the myth? It seems that we want our dead artistic heroes to have been poor, ignored, and politically correct.
It's romantic. It's a very old myth of the artist. Struggling, visionary, seeing beyond their own existence and beyond their own age into something essential, possibly religious, some greater dimension, but unrecognised. And so it fits into all the romantic myths.
We don't want them to have been wealthy, porn-buying, whore-liking, loyal senior civil servants of the Habsburg Empire with useful literary friends.
But hold on, why does it matter if there's a myth about Franz Kafka? Because it stops us seeing his amazing work as it really is. I'll give you an example. The Trial has maybe the most famous beginning of any novel. A man is arrested one morning without having done anything wrong. The myth means that when we read it, we can't help seeing some premonition of the Holocaust. But when Kafka himself read the opening of The Trial to his friends, they all, including Kafka himself, ended up laughing uncontrollably.
If the myth of Kafka could be budged an inch so that people actually realise the humour in them, that would be a great thing. If you read him as a satire of contemporary institutions, a satire of bureaucracy, and a satire of the way power works, I think he's very successful.
So let's look at Kafka's works as social satires. Then maybe we'll understand how Max Brod and Kafka's other cafe friends reacted when they first heard them.
One day, he read Metamorphosis, and people started laughing. So Brod said, Franz, I hope you were not offended when people started laughing when you read your Metamorphosis. And Kafka said, on the contrary, I meant it this way. I wanted them to laugh.
He wanted them to laugh? Yes. Kafka's great works are black comedies. They're not about innocent people trapped in miscarriages of cosmic justice. They're about deluded people who just can't imagine a world without the powers that be.
He gave extraordinarily precise images of the apprehensions, the anxieties of a particular historical moment. And actually they're ones that are very close to us now still, the world that's insecure.
Kafka is a key to our bizarre world. Everything what people do not understand, they say it's Kafkaesque.
The world can be a scary and confusing place, and the temptation to look back into a somehow more secure and more glorious past is as strong for us as it ever was. But Kafka's works are one great warning against the suicidal insanity of looking back in wistfulness. That's why they should be read now more than ever.